Scrolls Discovery Myths. It's a story that feels like it was ripped from the pages of an adventure novel. A grand, meticulously planned archaeological expedition, led by brilliant professors in pith helmets, venturing into the desolate Judean wilderness. They follow ancient maps, decipher cryptic clues, and, against all odds, unearth a long-lost library that will change history forever. It's a fantastic story, and it is a complete myth. The real discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls was messy, accidental, and driven not by academic pursuit, but by a lost goat. The year is 1947. The setting is the stark, sun-scorched landscape near the northwestern shore of the Dead Sea. This is a place of dramatic, limestone cliffs riddled with caves, a place that feels ancient and forgotten. Our protagonist is not a seasoned archaeologist, but a young Bedouin shepherd named Muhammad Edvib, the Wolf. He, along with his cousins, is tending his flock, a routine task in a timeless land. But on one fateful day, one of his goats goes missing. Searching for the strayed animal, he clambers up the treacherous cliffsides, scanning the inhospitable terrain. He spots a dark opening in the rock face, a cave he'd never noticed before, located in an area known as Qumran. Thinking the goat might have wandered inside, he does what any shepherd might do. He picks up a stone and tosses it into the darkness, hoping the sound will startle the animal out. But the sound he hears back is not the bleating of a goat. It's the sharp, unmistakable crack of shattering pottery. Curiosity piqued, the young shepherd calls over his cousin, and together they nervously enter the cave. Their eyes slowly adjust to the gloom. What they find inside is not a lost goat, but a collection of tall, cylindrical clay jars, some with their bowl-shaped lids still intact. Most are empty, but inside one of the jars that Muhammad's stone had broken, and a few others, they find something extraordinary: bundles wrapped in old linen cloth. Peeling back the decaying fabric, they uncover dark, brittle scrolls of leather parchment, covered in a strange script they don't recognize. Think about this moment. These young men had no concept of what they had found. To them, this wasn't the oldest collection of biblical manuscripts ever discovered. It was just old leather, maybe valuable to someone, maybe not. They gathered 7 scrolls from this first cave, later designated Cave 1, and took them back to their camp. For a time, these priceless artifacts, which had survived 2,000 years of history in the stable, dry climate of the desert cave, were just hanging in a bag on a tent pole, their immense significance completely unknown. The journey from a Bedouin tent to the halls of academia was a long and convoluted one. The shepherds, hoping to sell their find, brought the scrolls to a local antiquities dealer in Bethlehem named Kondo. Kondo, a Syrian Orthodox Christian, was intrigued but also cautious. He bought some of the scrolls for a pittance and pointed the shepherds toward the Syrian Orthodox monastery of St. Mark in Jerusalem, thinking the script might be ancient Syriac. Here, the scrolls came into the hands of the Archbishop Athanasius Samuel. He too recognized their antiquity but couldn't identify them. He even posted an advertisement in a newspaper, hoping a scholar might be able to help. This is where the story shifts from chance discovery to scholarly verification, but the myth of a clean, organized process is further debunked. The initial reaction from many experts was skepticism. In late 1947, Dr. John C. Trevor, a young scholar and photographer at the American School of Oriental Research in Jerusalem, received a call from the monastery. When Archbishop Samuel unrolled the scrolls before him, Trevor was stunned. The script looked incredibly ancient. He photographed the texts and sent the film to the most renowned biblical archaeologist of the day, William F. Albright at Johns Hopkins University. Albright's response was a telegram that would echo through history. "Congratulations on the greatest manuscript discovery of modern times." He dated the script to around 100 BC. The secret was out. The accidental discovery by a shepherd looking for a goat had just rewritten the history of the Bible. But this was only the beginning. The revelation sparked a frantic race. On one side were the archaeologists, launching formal expeditions to excavate the Qumran area. On the other were the Bedouins, who knew the terrain better than anyone and were now highly motivated by the prospect of finding more valuable scrolls. Over the next decade, this chaotic scroll rush led to the discovery of 10 more caves in the vicinity, yielding a treasure trove of texts. But this treasure was not a collection of complete books. It was a staggering collection of over 100,000 fragments, some no bigger than a postage stamp. The real work was not in the finding, but in the painstaking, multi-generational effort to clean, sort, and piece together this colossal jigsaw puzzle of ancient history. So, the myth of a single grand expedition finding a lost library couldn't be further from the truth. The reality was a chance encounter followed by a chaotic scramble, culminating in a puzzle that scholars are still working to solve today. It's a story of luck, commerce, and academic revelation, far more human and far more fascinating than any myth.
Biblical canon truth. The story of the scroll's discovery is incredible, but it's often overshadowed by an even more pervasive and sensational myth, the myth of their content. The idea is tantalizing. Deep in the desert caves, a secret library was found, containing lost gospels, secret books of the Bible, or explosive prophecies that the church or rabbinic authorities don't want you to see. It's the stuff of conspiracy thrillers and best-selling novels. It suggests that the Dead Sea Scrolls contain a revolutionary new Bible that could fundamentally rewrite Judaism or Christianity. This is perhaps the most significant misunderstanding about the scrolls, and the truth, while less sensational, is infinitely more profound. So, what do the scrolls contain? Let's break it down. The vast collection is typically divided into 3 main categories. The first, making up about 40% of the texts, are what we can call biblical manuscripts. These are copies of books that are found in the Hebrew Bible, or the Christian Old Testament. In fact, every book of the Hebrew Bible is represented among the fragments, with the sole exception of the book of Esther. But here's the crucial point. These are not books of the Bible. They are simply the oldest existing copies of the books we already knew. And when we say old, we mean breathtakingly ancient. Before the discovery at Qumran, the oldest complete Hebrew Bible manuscript was the Leningrad Codex, dating to around 1000 AD. The scrolls from Qumran are over 1,000 years older, with some dating as far back as the 3rd century BC. The most famous example is the Great Isaiah Scroll, found in that very first cave. It's a magnificent 20-foot-long parchment containing the entire book of Isaiah, and it's dated to around 125 BC. When scholars compared this ancient scroll to the medieval Masoretic text, the standard version of the Hebrew Bible used today, they were astonished. The text was virtually identical, word for word, across vast stretches. This was a powerful affirmation of the careful, meticulous tradition of scribal transmission over a millennium. However, virtually identical is not the same as completely identical, and this is where the true revolution lies. The scrolls revealed that while the text was incredibly stable, it wasn't static. There were small variations in spelling, grammar, and occasionally entire phrases. Furthermore, for some biblical books like Jeremiah or Samuel, the scrolls preserved versions of the text that were significantly different, some shorter, some with rearranged passages, than the standard Masoretic text. Some of these variants actually aligned more closely with the Septuagint, the ancient Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. What this proved was that in the Second Temple period, the era when Jesus lived and early Christianity was born, there wasn't one single universally accepted version of the biblical text. Instead, there was a plurality of textual traditions existing side by side. The scrolls didn't give us a new Bible, they gave us a dynamic snapshot of the Bible in the process of becoming, before it was standardized into the final form we know today. Now, what about the myth of lost gospels or writings about Jesus? This is a complete fabrication. There are absolutely no New Testament documents among the Dead Sea Scrolls, no Gospels, no letters from Paul, and no explicit mentions of Jesus of Nazareth or John the Baptist. The timeline simply doesn't work. The vast majority of the scrolls were written and hidden in the caves the time of Jesus and the rise of the Christian movement. So, if they aren't lost gospels, what makes up the other 60% of the collection? This is the second category, the non-canonical or sectarian texts. These are writings that were not included in the final Jewish or Christian biblical canons, but they give us an unprecedented window into the beliefs and practices of various Jewish groups during this fertile period. There's the community rule, a detailed manual for the life of the community, outlining their strict rules for purity, property, and governance. There's the War Scroll, an apocalyptic text that describes in vivid detail a final 40-year cosmic battle between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. There are Pesharim, which are commentaries on biblical books like Habakkuk, interpreting the ancient prophecies as being fulfilled in their own time, often in relation to a mysterious figure they called the Teacher of Righteousness. These texts reveal a community that believed it was living in the end times, awaiting a final divine judgment. They show us the theological world, the ideas about messiahs, purity, and apocalypse that formed the backdrop for the emergence of both rabbinic Judaism and early Christianity. The real treasure of the Dead Sea Scrolls isn't that they rewrite the Bible, but that they illuminate the world from which the Bible came.
Block 3. Essenes Authorship Debate. We've debunked the myths about how the scrolls were found and what they contain. But that leaves one final, crucial question. Who wrote them? For decades, the answer seemed simple, almost a matter of fact. The scrolls were the library of the Essenes, a peculiar and ascetic Jewish sect who lived a monastic-style life at the nearby settlement of Qumran. This Essene hypothesis became the standard textbook explanation. It's a neat, tidy story. But just like the other myths, the reality is far more complex, and the idea of exclusive Essene authorship is now the subject of a fierce and fascinating scholarly debate. Let's first understand why the Essene theory became so dominant. The evidence is compelling. Ancient writers like the Roman naturalist Pliny the Elder, the Jewish philosopher Philo of Alexandria, and the historian Flavius Josephus all described a group called the Essenes. Pliny, writing shortly after the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, gives a crucial geographical clue. He describes a group of Essenes living on the western shore of the Dead Sea, in a location that perfectly matches the ruins of Qumran. This is a powerful piece of external corroboration. Then there's the archaeology of Qumran itself. Excavations revealed a unique settlement with features that seemed to match the Essene lifestyle. Archaeologists uncovered a communal dining hall and assembly room, consistent with a group that shared meals and property. They found an unusually large number of ritual purity baths, or mikvaot, suggesting a community obsessed with ritual purity, a known Essene characteristic. They even found the remains of a scriptorium, a room with inkwells made of clay and bronze, where scholars believe the scribes sat and painstakingly copied their sacred texts. The most powerful evidence, however, comes from the scrolls themselves. Many of the sectarian texts, like the Community Rule, describe the theology and lifestyle of a specific community. This community was hierarchical, practiced communal ownership of property, and followed a solar calendar that was different from the lunar calendar used by the temple authorities in Jerusalem. They saw themselves as the true Israel, the sons of light, living in the wilderness to prepare for the end of days. These beliefs and practices align remarkably well with what Josephus and Philo wrote about the Essenes. The convergence of geography from Pliny, archaeology from Qumran, and the textual content from the scrolls themselves created what seemed like an open and shut case. The people of Qumran were Essenes, and this was their library. But over the years, scholars began to notice details that didn't quite fit this neat picture. The biggest challenge is the sheer diversity of the texts found in the caves.
Not all the scrolls reflect the same ideology. In fact, some texts present rules and ideas that seem to contradict each other. Why would one small, isolated, and highly regimented community preserve texts with conflicting viewpoints? This diversity led some scholars, most notably Norman Golb of the University of Chicago, to propose a radical alternative, the Jerusalem Library hypothesis. This theory suggests that the Qumran settlement had little or nothing to do with the scrolls. Instead, the caves were a hiding place, a sort of safe deposit box for Jerusalem's libraries. As the Roman army advanced on Jerusalem around 68 AD, priests and scribes from various factions, Pharisees, Sadducees, Zealots, and yes, maybe some Essenes, fled the city with their most precious texts and hid them in the remote, secure caves near the Dead Sea, intending to retrieve them after the war. A war they never returned from. This would explain the incredible diversity of the collection, as it would represent a cross-section of all Jewish thought at the time, not just the library of a single sect. While most scholars find the complete divorce of the scrolls from the Qumran site unconvincing, this theory forced everyone to reconsider the simplicity of the Essene hypothesis. The current consensus has settled into a more nuanced middle ground. Most scholars still believe that a sectarian community, who were either Essenes or a very similar group, lived at Qumran and were responsible for writing, copying, and collecting many of the scrolls. The evidence connecting the site to the texts is just too strong to ignore. However, they now acknowledge that the collection is not the product of this one group. It was likely their core library, but it also included works that they collected from the outside. They were not as isolated as once thought. They read, debated, and preserved texts from other Jewish groups. So, the myth of a single, isolated sect creating this library in a vacuum is debunked. The Dead Sea Scrolls are not just the voice of the Essenes. They are a chorus of voices from ancient Judaism. They are a snapshot of a vibrant, complex, and argumentative world. The lingering questions and the ongoing debates about their authorship are not a sign of failure, but a testament to their enduring power to challenge our assumptions. The truth of the Dead Sea Scrolls lies not in simple myths, but in the rich, complicated, and far more fascinating reality of the ancient world they reveal to us.